Okay, people should start populating.
Hello, hello, welcome. Cool. It seems like we have a lot of people joining right now. We're going to give it a couple of minutes to make sure that people have time to hop in here. Um, Go ahead and say hi in the chat. My name's Carolyn. Let me know where y'all are joining from. I am in usually sunny Austin, Texas, but it is quite cloudy today. So I have some solidarity for my friends over in Bellevue or Seattle or the sunny or the cloudy places. Oh my gosh, we've got people from all over. Hello from Brazil, from Portugal, the Dominican Republic. I was just there this summer. That's fun. Thank you for joining. Hello from Egypt and Italy. Awesome. Hi. So exciting. I'm really excited that everyone is here. I think at some point we are going to have a poll that's going to get dropped in the chat if people want to answer those questions. Just tells us a little bit about who you are, why you're interested in our talk today, and yeah, also a reminder that this is going to be recorded. So don't worry if you don't take notes furiously. You can go back and watch it at some point. I believe it'll be posted or sent out in the next 24 to 48 hours. So no need to stress about that. That poll is up. Go ahead and do that poll. Oh, I see someone else is from Texas. Howdy. That's where I'm from. Hello. Love to see the representation. Awesome. Like I said, we're just waiting a couple more minutes to let people get in here. Seems like people are joining a bit slower, so I think that we've got a bit of quorum. Hello, hello. Awesome. Okay, so yes, I see some people asking if this is recorded. It absolutely is going to be recorded. We are going to post it in the next 24 to 48 hours. So no need to try and write every single thing you hear down. There's going to be a lot of great content in here, and you will be able to go back and reference it. There is a Q&A, a little question in the chat. If you want to fill that out for us, it lets us know who you are. And also, if you have questions during this webinar, go ahead and put it in the Q&A chat. Don't put it in the chat. We don't want it to get lost. We want to be able to go back and reference your questions and answer them for you. So, awesome. Okay, I think that we have a good number of people. It started to even out. So I'm going to go ahead and get this party started. What do y'all say? Awesome. So, hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Carolyn Fana, and if you don't know where you are or what you're watching, this is going to be a quick little hour-long session about tips for prototyping a web game. We are really excited that you're here. So let's hop into it. Today, we have two awesome speakers joining us to talk about prototyping for web games. First, we have Andre Santos, who's a game developer on Instinct. They have a game called Superbike Racing. If y'all want to check it out, it's really fun. I played it last night. And the other person that we have speaking with us today is Konstantin Zakvatov, who is a C# developer on DAPALAB. They made a game called Muscle Shift. That one was also really fun. A little bit about me. My name is Carolyn Fana, like I said previously. I am a technical product manager here at Unity on the web platform. So I'm going to be asking some questions here to Andre and Konstantin, specifically about, like I said, prototyping for web, but designing for mobile and desktop web. What does that look like? Optimizing for web. What are some tips and tricks to make sure that when you play your web game, it's optimized well and people get into it quickly? And then testing your prototype. So let's go ahead and get started. One second, I'm just pulling up my questions. So hello, Andre and Konstantin. Let's kick off by telling me a little bit about your game and where the concept came from. Andre, if you want to start us off, tell us a little bit about Superbike Racing.
Yeah, for sure. So, hey everyone, my name is Andre, like Carolyn said, and my role within Instinct is to create branded web experiences for clients. So, Superbike Racing is our latest project, and well, as the title suggests, it's a racing game involving superbikes. It's available for web browsers and mobile. It's meant to be played for a snackable time, so you go in, you matchmake with friends, you race against random players or NPCs, you get points, you customize your bike, and you repeat. On top of that, we have the addition of physics-based controls, which are a bit hard to master. And then we have a fastest lap online leaderboard and platform achievements to involve more the community. So unlike our other projects, Superbike is not created for a brand itself, but it was created to allow other brands to come in and sponsor. So it's a bit of testing grounds for now. And the one track we have right now is sponsored by ourselves, Instinct. And we've proven that the concept works, as it's been very popular in the platform that we're hosting it on, which is spatial.io. And now we're just trying to get it out there for brands to try and imagine what their presence could look like in a game like this, basically.
Awesome. Thanks, Andre. Konstantin, do you want to tell us a little bit about Muscle Shift?
I'm likely talk about the race clicker, except of instead of Muscle Shift, it's our better game, I think, in my honest opinion. We try to find a light but competitive game focused on the simple but fun mechanics. So the concept came about after studying some popular games, and we find its mechanic, and we thought that this concept was interesting and already familiar to our target audience. So we took this mechanic, we took this idea and just make it better. We add clicker part when you can just pump it up your character and make it better, faster, stronger, and we level up the race part. Just added ability to catch up and hit opponents, to slow them down, to introduce some elements of action and strategy to this game.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'm so excited to learn more about the games and how y'all developed them as we keep talking. Just a reminder for the people joining in, we do have a Q&A at the end of this session. We are more than happy to answer your questions. Just so that they don't get lost in the chat, please put them in the actual Q&A button in the application so that we can keep track of them and answer them at the end. But that being said, let's dig into some more meaty questions here for designing on mobile and desktop web. Our first question is, how do you typically approach prototyping and ideation? And how is that different for web? Andre, do you want to kick us off with that?
Sure, yeah. So I think that in most, if not all cases, prototyping is really about proving that your concept works. So in Superbike's case, we really wanted to make sure that we could nail down the matchmaking system, which we had never done before. So as that was a fundamental part of our game concept and we had barriers to work with, such as being limited to one Unity scene, the first thing I focused on was making sure that online matchmaking was achievable and could be well executed in the platform we're working on. So that's what our prototype first looked like. There was no racing involved. It was just a simple scene, and there was a simple matchmaking button, and we'd get different users coming in, matchmaking, queuing up, starting up a little timer, and then because we have only one Unity scene, we'd play with server instances. So we'd get those users and move them to a different server, but within the same space. And instead of spawning the lobby, we'd spawn the track and all the race mechanics. After that, of course, the prototype evolved, and we started having a racing track block out offline to test the bike's physics and the race game logic.
Awesome.
That's it.
Thanks. Constantine, what about you? How do you typically approach prototyping and ideation, and how does that differ for the web specifically?
Usually our prototyping starts with creating some basic game mechanics using a minimalist approach without unnecessary visual effects, only main elements to quickly check if an idea works. At the same time, it all needs to be solid, both in terms of design and gameplay. And for web games, the aspect of performance and optimization is important since browsers have some limitations that they may require some simplification or a change in the approach to development, especially on the web. It's important to consider loading time and ease of learning of the game, since user will not wait for a long load or understand complicated controls because just in one or several clicks they just can get another game.
Yeah, that's definitely like time to play into a web game, I feel like is extremely important. So thank you. Let's go to the next one. When developing your prototype, was there a core vision or value or mechanic that it was really important to stay consistent to that helped guide you through the beginning? Andre, I think you kind of mentioned this in your process of how you started prototyping, but was there one specific thing that you kind of used as your northern light when you were doing your prototype?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, matchmaking was a big part of it. But then we also had, for example, this really complex asset pack that we based like the bikes off it. And so the asset pack basically brought already the bike's physics, and we had to adapt it to make it work. The problem is like these asset packs most times are made for console or like PC games. So unpacking it for web, for example, at the time, Spatial, it didn't allow for custom C# scripts, for example. So it's really hard to like bring in external asset packs. So I remember I had to like translate the scripts into visual scripting, which was a fun challenge, so to say. It was a learning experience. And yeah, that together with the matchmaking would be our fundamental points for Superbike. Nowadays they do allow custom C# scripting, by the way, but we decided to stick with visual scripting. And so, yeah, Superbike is actually mostly composed of script machines instead of C# scripts, which is kind of fresh to me as well. And so it's kind of a like bilingual game at this moment.
That's awesome. Constantine, what about you when you were making your game? Was there like one core vision, value, mechanic that y'all used as your northern light to stay consistent during your development process?
The main core vision was to create fast and intuitive game. This is easy to launch and understand for the first time when you launch it, regardless of whether the user in a desktop or mobile device. The main thing that we should make, and this is a gameplay that user will like, that was addicted to the user, and he wants to come back there again and again. Also, it's allowed us to focus on minimalist mechanics and a simple interface, avoiding complex elements that could make the user experience on the web platform worse.
Yeah, that's a really good call out there. And on that note, that takes into our next question very well. Were there any unexpected challenges or discovery when designing the UI or UX for your game? Constantine, you kind of mentioned that you wanted to make sure that it was easy for players to get in and a few clicks so that they didn't get, you know, distracted and go to a different game or something like that. Was there anything unexpected that you could tell our viewers about when designing for that?
When you creating the UX UI for web games, it could become more difficult to ensure that the interface was responsive across several devices. For example, sometimes controls that work well on desktop turn out to be awkward on touchscreen of mobile devices, or vice versa. For example, when we found out that clicking a finger on a smartphone screen to speed up is much more convenient and enjoyable than when you click on a mouse. So, which is why we had to expand the input and add the ability to click and speed up from the keyboard to make the players on the same level from different devices.
Andre, I feel like you probably have a similar experience there when it comes to racing games, right? When you're clicking on a mobile device versus a screen. Did y'all have any unexpected challenges as well during the designing of the UI or UX for your game?
Yeah, not just related to racing. Something that not a lot of people think about when designing for mobile is that they have this little, like, the camera notch on the top of the phone. So if you have any UI like straight to the left side, it gets occluded by the camera notch, which is like a shock when it happens the first time, but then you kind of learn how to deal with it by just, you know, having a little dead zone at the left always. But yeah, other than that, the biggest shock for us was that so Spatial has a default mobile controller for their games, and that works well in the most part. But in our case, joysticks, because then in our case we had joysticks on mobile and then WASD on web. And that would give us conflicting inputs from both platforms. And so what we did was we overrid that custom controller they had, and we made our own with like big fat up, down, left, and right buttons, so that it not only matches our UI, but it's also a much closer experience to what you'd want to have on web. And so even racing a web gamer with a mobile gamer, they have the same experience, and there's not any unfair advantages just because of the input controls.
So can you walk us through how you ensured the UI remained intuitive and responsive across those screen sizes in a web environment? What was that process of almost like testing and making sure that it was working well as you were developing?
Right. So a lot of it you can do with the editor. So the simulator tab, where you have a bunch of different devices to see what different resolutions look like. And in that simulator, you also have the camera notches, but I didn't know about that before. But yeah, usually having your canvases scale with screen size helps a bunch. I mean, I like to match width and height like a 0.5 ratio, and I feel like that gets the job done in most cases, as in like responsiveness for screen sizes. And next, the most important part really is anchors. So anchoring your UI to the right places on the screen makes a huge difference. So if you want to have something on the top right, but you have it anchored on the middle, if your screen becomes smaller or the resolution becomes smaller, then you get that UI element off screen. And same thing, if it becomes bigger, then you get kind of in the middle. It's kind of a weird position. So basically, any UI you want to be like, I need this to be on the top right. So anchor it to the top right and give it an offset. I just need to be centered, anchor it on the center. If I need something to be like filling up the screen or having a constant edge around the screen, just fill up and fill and stretch the anchors, you know? So it's really not that hard to make it consistent. You just have to know how to play and manage different anchors for different scenarios.
Constantine, I'm curious about your team. Did y'all have a process or anything that you specifically did to ensure that the UI remained intuitive while you were making your game?
Often we using to create responsive design, we use mobile first principle. It really helps to create interfaces that looks good, that feels good, that works well on small screens. And after that, we can just scale it to larger screens. We test it with another aspect ratio, and often it works great. But we often resort to the fact that if the game allows it, we design it in a vertical aspect ratio. So for, as I said, for mobile devices. But if project game not doesn't work well with vertical aspect ratio, we make interface on the widescreen, and our mobile first principle sometimes rarely works not so good.
Yeah, it's a good call out where a lot of the times mobile first designing can work really well and work to your advantage, but you have to be very careful about those times where maybe it doesn't, right? Awesome. Thanks so much. So let's move into our next section that I'm really excited about, optimizing for web. So let's go back to Andre. At the beginning, what did you predict would be the most important thing to optimize for your game for web? And what was the starting point? Was there one thing that you were specifically trying to target to optimize?
Yeah, so being a multiplayer game, my main concern from the start was that having multiple bikes on the same racetrack would impact performance. And I mean, it does, obviously, because more bikes and players means more vertexes being loaded. And so there's not much more you can do outside of optimizing those bike meshes, making sure they're not being rendered when out of view with simple occlusion culling, and setting up LODs just to have a lighter impact on performance when they're far away. Another thing that we ended up doing was, because it's a physics-based game, and we usually populate the games with NPCs. So if we have 2 players, we have 4 more NPCs. So always 6 bikes on race. So the NPCs don't use physics at all. They work as in, so you know, in some racing games, when you do a time and then you go to replay the race, you have a ghost that is showing you like your recent time. So that's how NPCs work. Basically, I recorded myself playing starting from P2, P3, P4, P5, and all the NPCs in the game are basically ghosts of mine. It's a very basic approach to NPCs. It's not the correct approach to NPCs, of course, but it is very performant because each NPC has like two predefined paths they can follow. And the way I did that was like, the way I recorded myself playing was like every 0.5 seconds, I'd record important position, rotation, and inclination axis. And then at the end of the race, I'd print that out to a string. And this string would sometimes have like 20,000 characters, so it's a big string. And then on Unity, I just place that string on, two strings on an NPC. And what they do then is, instead of having a dictionary saying like at time 0, I'm in this position, this rotation, this inclination, because like having that in a dictionary would mean that the bike would stutter, right? So every 0.5 seconds, the bike would stutter to a new position. So instead of that, we translated the string to animation curves. And having animation curves, the values between 0 and 0.5 are automatically interpolated. And so all that the NPCs do is basically read the animation curves depending on the current race time and just adjust their position and rotation accordingly. And that ended up working pretty well. And if you go play and go against the NPCs, you can barely tell that they're just like updating their position based on a predefined path.
Yeah, so it sounds like, in an effort to optimize the game, it did heavily influence how you designed the game and made those types of decisions. That was my next question, but you answered it beautifully within your answer. Constantine, what about y'all? What did you predict would be the most important thing to optimize in your game, and what was the starting point there?
We are on another hand of Andre. We think that the most important thing to optimize resource loading, so that the game would load quickly, even on slow connection. So we start at minimizing the size of the assets using the texture compression, audio files compression. We're always trying to optimize the code, for example, using the pools of repeating objects and avoid some heavy operations. In every project, we creating fast shaders and use as few materials as possible, so that we can it can be combined into batches and faster rendering in every frame. So all this allows us to reduce the load of the processor and memory, and also with tracking down and configure all of the assets included in the build, as well as remove those assets that shouldn't be included at all. Also, we often have some cheats, for example, with some details like shadows, by replacing them with some sprites or blob projectors, or completely abandon them. So shadow rendering has definitely become better now. But sometimes disabling them can be a main factor for weak devices.
That's interesting. So it sounds like your approach very much so is thinking more about loading time and how you can get people into the game quickly, and asset management. In that, did those optimization thought processes influence the design of the game at all? Was that something that, when you were thinking about how to make the assets and do the loadings and things like that, did that change the design process in any way, or did you really stay true to your design and work around that design?
We had to simplify all visuals and animations to reduce resource usage. So this pushed us towards a more minimalist, more cartoonish style, which also provided useful for improving the UX and UI also. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, no, that was a great answer. Thank you so much. Cool. So that was our section for optimizing the web. Our last section that we want to move into is testing the prototype. So let's see. Konstantin, let's stick with you for one more on this one. During prototyping, what tools did you use to leverage testing your game? And did you have to use different tools specifically for the web platform than you would usually use?
In common, we use Unity Profiler to monitor performance. This always helped us to identify bottlenecks and optimize the game early on. In the way of the web testing, we using just some browser dev tools like Chrome dev tools to monitor performance and some debug, especially because of in Unity sometimes project works absolutely perfect, but when you deploy it on the web, there are sometimes some underwater rocks which you couldn't expect. So it really helps, but there is no special or some different tools.
Great, thanks. Let's move back to Andre. I got a question for you. What factors do you feel were the most important to analyze during the prototyping section of your game development?
Yeah, so we were limited to only being able to test on web. So FPS were the bigger thing for us to analyze. And it's constantly being monitored just to make sure that nothing crazy is going on, like Konstantin said. Because it's fun to see, like in a track, in one turn you have 120 FPS capped, and in another you might drop down to 90. And that's simply because you're just rendering more background things that you shouldn't be rendering at all. So it really depends on where you are at the track, for example. Even today, we're still we're still using our published version to prototype further. So since we've made it public, the game, on September 10th, we've updated about 90 times already. Small updates, of course, fixes, but we're always monitoring not just user feedback, but also what they do in the game. So analytics. So in our case, the best one we have is the times they make racing. And at the beginning, we would see that a lot of players either A, would not finish races, or B, wouldn't have times like way off what we expected. And so the NPCs were actually super hard. That was the issue. So people would crash at turn one, see the NPCs go away, and then just quit because like they can't catch them anymore. And so that early feedback really helped us balance the NPCs. And now, for example, we have one that finishes around like 4 minutes and one that finishes at 7 minutes. So in that time, we have like 5 NPCs, and every time someone goes racing, they never finish last, very rarely finish last. And either a fast racer is battling with the fast NPC, or a slow racer is battling with another NPC for third. And there's always NPCs like that initial analysis of times that users were giving us helped us really like balance NPCs to make sure that every case scenario is kind of looked out for, even though the NPCs can't adapt to the players themselves.
Yeah, because it's important that players are still having fun, right? If they're losing every time, they might go, oh, what the heck, right? The NPCs are too good. And now we know it's actually Andre who was out there playing all the time, right? Konstantin, what about you? When you were making your game, what were the most important factors to analyze during prototyping?
I think one of the most important were performance, of course, and responsiveness of the interface on different devices, because sometimes there are some specific challenges, included unstable behavior on some features on different browsers, especially when browsers on the different engines. For example, one browser on the Chromium or Chrome, it works well, but another is, for example, Firefox, and absolutely the same build, but one part of the UI works absolutely unstable, and sometimes it's really challenging. Because of it, we should tested our feature on different browsers, on different versions of browsers, and it took a lot of time sometimes.
On that note, was there anything in specific that you felt was really challenging about testing for a web platform prototype? Anything else that you would specifically want to call out?
I think there is no some another specific differences between browsers to browser. It's almost always something about that on the one engine it works well, but on another engine it works absolutely unpredictable, and how it will work, this is the most challenging because you cannot predict it until you test it.
So it sounds like testing is key, right? Making sure that you know actually what,
as always.
Yeah, what you're building is how it's being affected by different browsers and things like that. Awesome. Okay, last question that we have planned. Let's go to Andre. How did the web platform influence, help, or challenge the iteration process for your game?
Yeah, so it's a bit like Konstantin said, it's harder to debug on web, and especially as, I mean, it depends on where you're hosting your web games, I guess. So I'll be speaking on my experience, which is hosting it on this platform on Spatial.io. And the good part about it is that it's very freeing not having to worry about like multiplayer server and user authentication and all the things, because they do that for us. And so as a beginner getting into multiplayer, it's really incentivizing to just be able to build something that works out of the box. And we just publish build, and instantly I can get on two different browsers, plus on my phone, and have 3 accounts in the space, and I can test with 3 accounts like right away. And that's great. I think that's one of the great helps of web in this case, but it's a very niche case scenario. I get it. Iteration wise, that helps, but it also doesn't help that you can't do much of it on the editor. So I guess I was very used to just testing things on the editor, like play mode, testing, console, okay, good to go. But now I have to like push to the sandbox, test it on the web, and that takes a bit more like time in the iteration. So like it escalates like the time it takes me to deploy something. And yeah, I think I'm not missing anything. That might be it. I mean, there's some other things, for example, on this SDK we're using, for example, it helps a lot with like syncing objects and saving player data to the cloud for their cloud instead of using player prefs. So it really depends on where you're hosting it. But if you have the right toolkit and the right SDK, I think it helps a lot to build web games.
Love that. Konstantin, what about you? How did the web platform influence, help, or challenge the iteration process for your game?
I think web platform help us, mostly help us than challenging. So because of the web platform sped up the iterative process, as changes could be quickly deployed and tested. However, performance and cross-browser compatibility, as I mentioned before, issues required additional optimization efforts, and you have quickly deployed by sometimes testing takes more time than the deploying.
Yeah, so it sounds like when developing for a web game, making sure that you take account that time that it'll take to do that testing is definitely important. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. We have reached the end of our questions that we prepared, but exciting news. All of our viewers have been sending us questions as well. So let's move into some of our live Q&A. First up, and either one of y'all can unmute and answer these questions, I think. What server did you use for matchmaking and client server data? Was it AWS or something like that?
So it might be to me because I mentioned matchmaking. So we're using the spatial.io, the platform, which handles all server-side relations on its own. So we didn't really have to worry about any databases or AWS at all, which is great when you're trying to just make a simple multiplayer game. So yeah, I don't even know how to make an AWS like matchmaking system. So just to show you that I really like, if it wasn't for this platform and the toolkit, I could not have done it literally.
That's awesome. It sounds like that was a really exciting opportunity for you. Okay, let's go to our next one. It looks like this one was answered in chat, but I'm curious if either one of y'all have an answer to it. How do you handle iOS limitations, including garbage collector and different WebGL capabilities between iPhone and iPad models? So like iPhone 13 versus iPhone 16.
I was hoping Konstantin would answer this one because I have no idea. Basically,
If
yeah.
not, that's totally fine. I think it was answered in chat by one of
You know?
our Unity folks. That's
Okay.
fine. If someone would mind pushing the answer to that again, maybe reposting it in the chat so that people can see it, that would be good. Okay. Another multiplayer question. How did you get players to try your multiplayer game when you were just starting out? Was it hard to attract players to play at the same time?
I'm not sure if Konstantin again. Do you? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I think the main thing that you should show player competitive, that the game competitive, and if there are some equal opponent to player, he wants to beat them, and this is the main thing when you make a multiplayer game. So there are some first levels almost always. This is the game with bots that will increase their power from level to level to prepare the player for the real players from another world, from another countries, from another cities, and so that they could compete in the good that became it interesting to them.
Yeah, and if I just add up to this, because like being dependent on having multiple players online at the same time to being able to play, that's why we created the NPCs, because we don't want players to get there and just have to wait for someone to join. So I think it's important to always have like non-playable characters that the player can play with and feel like they're playing with other players as well. So not having a multiplayer game completely dependent on having multiple users on at once, which is not the easiest thing to do on a web game because it's not centralized around it, I think is also a big important part.
Awesome. Okay. Let's go to this one. Sounds interesting. I think both of you might be able to answer this one. How do you know that a prototype works? Do you test it with a player base? Do you give it to random friends? Do you test it yourself? Do you have your company test it? Do you have Unity Analytics? Do you analyze using Unity Analytics creating funnels, or do you go by playtime and user feedback? So this is kind of a 2-for-1. But basically, how do you get people to test it? And then how do you analyze real-time data?
Will be first. At first, we tested by ourselves. And then our target is our friends, our families. And after that, we of course checking it on the auditory and collect some statistics, some metrics. We using funnels from game analytics to analyze how players how is it good? Does player plays well long enough, and where's the problem when the most of the players shut down our game, and after that we analyze it and make some fixes.
Yeah, in our case, we can't really rely on Unity Analytics because it's not compatible with the SDK. So we rely on the platform's analytics instead, that their own analytics, which has views, playtime, and all that. And then we have our own very primal ways of analyzing it, which is seeing how many times you're registered in the leaderboard from time to time, just seeing if it's engaging well. And yeah, I think I've mentioned before as well, like checking, at the beginning we were checking out the times that the people were doing to see how they were doing. But to get people to play our game, I think it's easier when you have your game on a platform because you publish and out of nowhere it's available to like a bunch of players that are looking for games. So we definitely did not have that issue of like having to have our friends play it, which is something I did a lot for single player games back then, where we had a build and then like you go with the build like, okay, please play this and please play this. We have a lot less of that now, which is great.
Yeah, I know for myself, I have been a playtester for a ton of games that my friends make, which is always really fun because sometimes you know what they want you to do and you're like, oh, I can be chaotic and do something different, add a fun little challenge for them. But it's really interesting to hear what y'all are saying about, when people leave, how people are engaging with leaderboards, things like that. So using that type of data also to infer how users are enjoying the game and how it works is, I think, a really good thing to note. All right, let's see. Thank you. Let's do a couple more questions here. When making multiplayer games for web using Unity 6, is there a recommended amount of players for the best performance? And I guess on top of that, does the number of players interact with the performance of the game?
I mean, I'm not sure about how many players. I'm not sure if that was the question, like the limit of players. But yeah, for sure, more players impacts performance. Not sure about Unity 6 though. I haven't tested it out. Maybe someone in the chat knows better. But yeah, more players usually impacts performance by the reasons I said earlier. Like it's just more meshes to load, especially in a web game. I mean, if you have more avatars of players, in my case, more bikes, it's definitely going to be heavier. But there are ways to try and make it less heavy, I guess. And pushing the limit, I mean, that's the goal, like seeing how many you can get in there without breaking the game. So I don't think there's a set limit of players.
Yeah, and I think it would definitely depend on, the game itself a lot, right? What the design looks like, what type of art style you have, how complex that art style is, right? The more complexity in the design and the art style, probably the less amount of it you can have in terms of multiplayer.
Right. If you have like each avatar is a bean instead of like, a fully fledged AAA character, then yeah, you can probably have like 100 people in the game instead of like 5.
Constantine, I see you have a...
Yeah, I think it's really depends on which type of a game you're prototyping. If there is something AAA, there's of course there are no 100 people will work well, especially on the web. But if there are some lightweight game where the character maybe a dot or something similar to this, there could be a lot of players. I think it's also depends on which cloud service you're using. Maybe there are some more restrictable than Unity with this with the in the question of performance.
Awesome, thanks. That was a good question. All right, we've got about a little less than 10 minutes left. I've got 2 questions left that I want to ask y'all. This one, we may or may not have the answer to, but I think it's a good question, so let's ask. I know the show diagnostics overlay option that shows some metrics in Google Chrome exists. Apart from this tool, are there any other web-based tools that you use to tools you use to measure performance and memory in different browsers?
I think there are some almost similar tools in different browsers with some basics tools when you could debug something or could memory usage, CPU usage. It's not only about Chrome. The good tools, for example, in Firefox, one of the best, I think. I think it's not too different from browser to browser.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, lastly, this one's a bit more open-ended, but I like this one and I have an answer for it after y'all. Are there any tips for optimizing the initial load time? I know that that's something that we've discussed being really important for users. It's something Unity cares about as well. Is there anything forefront of your mind that you think is really important when optimizing for that load time?
Yeah, like Konstantin mentioned earlier, import settings play a huge role in import time, in loading time. I mean, like knowing how to import like images, video, sounds, like knowing the right settings you have to have, like you need to have a performant game is super important. Like using, for example, for images, using textures or sprites that are not, not sure how the term is, but like 4, 8, 16, 266, 256, 128. What's that term called? Base of 2, I think. Power of 2, yeah, power of 2. Someone said it. Having non-power of 2 textures is like a killer right away. So if you can have all your textures in power of 2 and keeping them as small as possible, that alone helps a ton. And just not having clutter in your project at all. Like anything you're not using, you can just remove it out and keep that build size small. And then, yeah, most things I think Konstantin mentioned already, but if you want to remind you, I'll be my guest.
As Andrew says, yep, you should use smaller audio files and sprites and etc. To compress your files, and also you should try Unity addressables to make the files loads in when it needs to be So if you in your session do not open, for example, shop, so you don't need all of the clothes to load in memory. So that's will be easy to device to load your game because it's smaller.
Yeah, awesome. And then I know for a fact that the team that I work on the web platform here at Unity has a couple of docs actually out. I believe they're titled something along the lines of how to optimize your web build for mobile or desktop. But there's a lot of really good tips, specifically in your player settings, that you can do to optimize it. I know in some of the test cases we've used, we've taken a couple of seconds off of the load time just by changing those player settings. So if somebody from Unity in the chat could find those and send it, that would be really awesome. But if not, I'm pretty sure you can Google it. It's definitely in our public docs. But that being said, that's going to be the end of our Q&A session. Thank you so much to everybody for joining. We really, really appreciate you taking time in the past hour to listen to the experiences that Andre and Constantine have had in building web games and prototyping. Huge thank you to both Andre and Constantine for taking time to impart your knowledge. And shout out to the team in the background here at Unity that put this together. Thank you. We really appreciate you. I also want to do a quick shout out. Crazy Games is hosting their Crazy Web Game Jam 2024. Registration is open for that right now, and that will go through November 1st through the 8th. We're super excited about this, and we're really excited to see the games that come out of it. So hopefully you can use some of this knowledge to make a really exciting game jam game and have a really fun time doing that. So make sure you sign up for that. But with that, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. This will be recorded or has been recorded and it will be posted in the next 24 to 48 hours. So keep your eye on that and keep your eye open for any other future roundtable webinars coming out of Unity coming up. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, and thank you for having me as well. It's been an honor. It's been an honor, and yeah, have a great day, everyone. Have a great day, Carolyn, and yeah, till next time.
I want to say thank you also to all your team to invitation, and for you, Caroline, especially, and Andrew.
Yes, thanks so much. This was amazing.